Shabbos, everybody. Good Shabbos. Morning, everyone. Good morning. See? Okay. So I'm thrilled to see everybody here. Hope you're having a good Shabbos morning coffee and maybe a little rugelach. I have a little rugelach here. If anybody wants one, a little rugelach. My son brought it in and said, "Rugelach, Abba, here's your rugelach, Chaim." So Parashat Yitro. Everybody ready? Ready? All right. Let's see. We have, how many of you are here? Let's see, about 43 people, 43 cameras. I think I'm mostly on Shabbat morning. We have mostly, at least those who wake up are usually one at a time. I don't see a lot of couples, although Emet and Hava, there they are. Usually they're together. Okay. Margot, would you honor us? I'm going to share my screen with you, and love it if you would let's see, let me try my preview. And let's see. Would you take us away, Margot, with the bracha that precedes the Torah reading, the Torah study, rather? Let me see, make sure that I can give you permission here. Let's see. I know, I'm giving, there you go.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen. So may the Torah this morning be sweet for us and for all those who are in our sphere, who are in some way impacted by our learning of Torah. May the learning of Torah be almanat la'asot. Gedolah Torah ha'mevi'ah lidei ma'aseh. Great is the Torah that we learn that brings in some way into a behavioral change, not just in the asiyah, but also behavior in terms of emotion also and thought, all of those different dimensions of the way the Torah moves us. This morning, we're going to be in Revelation, as we often are. When we come to Parshat Yitro, there are so many places in Parshat Yitro to land on. And I wanted to begin with this, because Rabbi Diane spoke about it last night. I thought it would be, I'd wanted to talk a little bit about the end of the Parsha, but I decided to change last night after listening to what Rabbi Diane spoke about in terms of intimacy and kirva and the ambivalence of Revelation. So maybe we would touch on this morning. If someone, let's see, that we can get a reader for this. You know what? Why don't I just invite you, Michaela, or you know what? If I can do it, I can. Do I have the permissions here? I want to allow people to unmute themselves. It'll be easier when I call on people. Let's see. Let's see if we can get Ilana. Maybe Ilana, can you read the source? Are you okay? Do you have a moment or no?
Sure. Me, Alana Schneier.
Ilana Schneer, exactly.
Yeah.
So source number 1 from Aviva Zornberg. Good morning, Ilana. I saw Adam over there. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning.
Boker Tov, my friends. You know, families that learn Torah together. I love it. So this beautiful piece from Aviva Zornberg on this week's Torah portion in her book, which has become kind of canonical, right? Like this book from Zornberg, the reflections on Exodus, particulars of rapture. This is a very powerful moment. So go ahead, Ilana.
The virtue of the narrative, therefore, is that it engages with the ambivalences, the attraction, and the repulsion of one who, against all odds, approaches Sinai. If therapeutic language is to give life, it must address a real trauma, a wound inflicted, in a sense, by the very encounter with God.
Thank you, Ilana. This way of entering into Revelation or into the conversation about Sinai is decidedly different than the typical way. And we've discussed it so many times in this community over the last 14 years. This is not it's not our first rodeo. Like the sense that when one reads Sinai, when one reads the revelation at Sinai, the 10 utterances, Aseret HaDibrot, this encounter, this long awaited for, this long longed for, this very powerful moment, which becomes, of course, the bedrock of the Western religious tradition, is not without ambivalence. It's not without a larger context in which it emerges, and it comes and addresses us. Lest we think that it's all lights and lovely. Revelation at Sinai is fraught with terror and with other valencies, right, that are decidedly not obvious in saying that one wants to come close to the divine. Right? We have Moshe, right, who's in the Mosaic encounter with the divine. There is fear, there's trembling, to use Kierkegaard's terminology, right? He stands before the theophany of the burning bush. But here with the people, it's not just a sense of humility, but a whole other valence is brought in. And I wondered if maybe Adam, since you're there and this is your field, I wonder if you would read source number 2. I want to be fully. Get the entire ganze Mishpacha. We get Adam in, we get Ilana in. Why not? Ilana reads about Sinai, Adam reads about Freud. Adam, why don't you take Freud?
So after Freud, if we are to take him on his own terms, our knowledge of his or of anyone else's life, and indeed our wish for knowledge about his life, has to be tempered with a certain irony. Where we love, we always hate, and vice versa. We are wanting more life for ourselves, but we are also wanting, in one of Freud's memorable phrases, to die in our own way. We are full of vitality, but he tells us in Beyond the Pleasure Principle, we crave inertia, insentience. We want to get better, but we love our suffering. What Freud increasingly found most difficult to cure in his patients was their mostly unconscious wish not to be cured. In his search for cures, Freud found just how incurable we are. That is, he found how much pleasure we can get from our suffering. This is the encapsulated in the phrase the fear, the wish and the fear. Right?
This is Adam Phillips, right? The great philosopher and psychoanalyst, the British philosopher and psychoanalyst, in his book about becoming Freud in the Jewish Lives series from out of Yale University. Isn't that a remarkable that in Freud's search for cures, he discovered how incurable we are. Like in his longing for redemption, like in this story, Moses finds how hard it is to get us out. Like as much as we were screaming to get out of Egypt, we also, as soon as we left, said we want to go back. And here we are arriving at Sinai, and in a moment you'll see in this encounter with the divine, the thing the thing wished for, the thing longed for, is also the thing most to be feared. And this tap dancing between is such a profoundly important part of the revelation experience, and dare to say the healing experience, right? The express wish to have things change, and yet the unconscious, often and sometimes made conscious, attempts that we make to sabotage the very thing that we that we want, right? Or to find it in some way very, very complicated. So Mark Horn, our celebrity, would you please, our Kabbalistic Tower reader, O ye of New York Times fame, we're so happy to have you here this morning. Would you mind reading this this primal scene that will take place in this morning's parsha? It's source number 3.
Okay. Exodus 19:9-13. And God said unto Moses, Lo, I come unto thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with thee, and may also believe thee forever. And Moses told the words of the people unto the God. And thou shalt set bounds unto the people round about, saying, Take heed to yourselves, that ye not go up into the mount, or touch the border of it. Whosoever toucheth the mount shall be, scroll down a little, please, shall be surely put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through. Whether it be beast or man, it shall not live. When the ram's horn soundeth long, they shall come up to the mount.
Okay, so if we bracket here the punishment for touching the mountain or coming close to the mountain, in other words, the Torah is trying to tell us that this is an egregious error on the part of the people. They shouldn't come to the mountain. They shouldn't touch it, right? They should, like, there's something scary about the mountain, or something that should be venerated about the mountain, something that should be honored about the mountain. Don't just come up and touch it. But before that, in Mark's reading, in verse 9, we have these words. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, as you said, God says to Moshe, I will come to you in this thick cloud, Av Anan. Anan is cloud, Av is thick, a thick, dense cloud, so that the people, Ba'avur, it's very interesting, so that, why is the thick cloud necessary? It seems like it's, that there is something about the thick cloud that makes the people's listening possible, so that the people can hear when I speak with you. We'll see in a moment, Nachmanides has something to say about this particular strategy. Like, why do the people need to overhear? It sounds like overhearing Moshe being spoken to by God. V'gam b'cha ya'aminu olam. And they also will believe in you, have faith in you for always, right? Through this moment. We've already been told that they believed in Moshe and in God earlier in last week's parsha. As soon as the sea split, Vayah Yisrael et Mitzrayim met al sfat hayam, that they saw last week, and then it says Vayaminu b'Adonai v'Moshe avdo, they believed. But apparently, there needs to be a continual promise of object or prophetic constancy for the people to actually have something that they take with them. But okay, be that as it may, Vayaged Moshe divrei ha'am. So Moshe then tells God the words of the people. We don't see anywhere here where the people have spoken, but apparently Moses has something has been said to Moses already that he is now bringing to God at this moment. God says to Moshe, I'm going to come to you in a thick cloud, and they will believe in you as they hear. The whole nation will hear me talking to you as I speak with you. Their eavesdropping will become a source of their faith. And then Moshe, without even missing a beat, Moshe says to God something that the people had apparently given to Moshe to relay to God. Everybody catch that? Do we know? We don't know in this source what the words that Moshe has, right? What Moshe shares with God, but Rashi fills us in, the great 11th century French commentator. In between making bottles of wine, Rashi had time to go and write a commentary on everything. So Rabbeinu Shlomo Yitzchaki, the great Rashi here, fills us in. What exactly did Moshe tell God at this really important moment? Anybody want to read this? Let's get, let's look around. Jill, can you read this? Love hearing your voice.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have an answer. I heard from them that they want to hear directly from you. One can't compare hearing from a messenger to hearing from the king himself. We want to see our king.
So Rashi brings the Midrash. Rashi in the 11th century brings something from the rabbis who lived before Rashi, who, like all of us, when reading this verse, wondered, we wonder what Moshe brought to God. God just said, I'm going to come in a thick cloud. I'll speak to you, Moshe. The people will overhear. They'll be listening in, and they'll hear me talking to you. There'll be a prophetic kind of a hit of the prophetic waft, as it were. We're going to kind of have a contact high from God's conversation with Moshe. And then Moshe responds, Vayaged Moshe. And all of a sudden, Moshe hears these, like God telling Moshe, this is what's about to happen. And Moshe says, well, let me tell you what the people asked for. And so the rabbis who read this said, we wonder, we wish we were, as it were, eavesdropping on this conversation between God and Moshe. Here's what we think Moshe told God. Here's what we think the people asked for. Moshe brings their request, like he's like the union head. Here's what the people's demands are. So this is such a great, listen to this Midrash. I mean, it's so beautiful, Jill, the way you read it. You're right. I heard from them that they want to hear directly from you, right? Shamati mehem sheritzonam lishmo mimcha. Like, it's really nice that you want to come to me in a thick cloud. Moshe says, I get it. I'm special. I'm one of the, but they're kind of, the people kind of want to hear from you directly, right? They really, really want to hear your voice, not in a secondhand way. They don't want a cliche. They want the direct intimacy of contact. They want to be the ones in that thick cloud. They don't want to overhear it. They want, that feels to them too filtered. They want an immediate access point, right? And ritzonam lishma mimcha. Their desire is to hear directly from you, right? Eina domeh shomeh mipi hashaliach leshomeh mipi hamelech. Ritzonenu lirot et malkeinu. This is like, not only do they want to hear from you, they want to see you. They really want to know you, right? And so now listen to the way that Rashi then reads the next verse. The very next verse says that God says to Moshe, really make sure that they don't come close to the mountain. Really make sure they don't come close to the mountain. So let me get another reader. David Kurtz, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Can you read Rashi on the very next moment where God says, make sure they don't come up to the mountain and have happen to them what could happen to them? What does Rashi say?
Lest they break through, etc., so that they don't destroy their standing through their desire to see God coming too close to the mountainside.
So how does God respond, as it were, to this, right? So Reb David, so in this reading, Rashi's kind of subtextual reading, Rashi says that the flow of the verses is like this. Moses gets instructions from God. I'm going to be talking to you, and they're going to overhear it, and that'll be enough. And then Moshe says, well, wait a second, God, they really want to see you. They really want to know you. They really want to hear you directly. Don't give them this kind of filtered through a messenger business. And then the very next verses are God telling Moshe not to come near them, tell the people not to come too close to the mountain. How does Rashi then understand this next moment in the Revelation saga? What's the purpose of this Hagbalah, of this boundaries around the mountain? So, David, what do you think?
I didn't know you were asking me. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, it's my fault. Go ahead. I really want to hear directly from you.
I am so sorry. I was involved in something else.
No, it's okay. No, I'm not testing you. That's
no. I apologize. I got distracted for a second.
No worries. So essentially, Rashi it actually continues this conversation. God then says to Moshe, no, it's going to be too much. Their desire to see me, right? Ta'avatam el Adonai lirot. Their desire to see me can be their undoing. It'll be too much for them, right? I'm worried about their capacity. I'm worried about how much exposure they can handle. I'm worried about whether or not this will traumatize them. It can be too much. It can be too much. I'm sensitive to that. So then, if you look at the next source, look at the way that the book of Deuteronomy then plays out, right? I'm sorry. Go a little bit further in here, right here in in source number 6. Let's actually play out what happens. Let's see who can read. Somebody raise your hand. I don't want to call on someone who might be in another place. Michelle, go ahead, Michelle. You can read. This is the next moment in the Revelation story, and I see your hand. I'll get to it in a second. Okay.
Okay. And all the people perceived the thunderings and the lightnings and the voice of the horn and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood afar off. And they said unto Moses, speak thou with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die.
So what happens, Michelle?
So we have lightning, we have thunder. Someone is blowing the shofar, and I've always wondered who that was. The mountain is smoking, And when everybody saw this, they were very frightened, and now did not want to hear directly, did not want to have direct communication, but wanted Moses to go ahead and tell them what God communicates to him. They're frightened of dying.
So in this not so subtle. I mean, it's pretty outrageous. So they have this kind of altered experience. V'chola amro imata kola. This becomes very well known that they saw what can normally be heard, and they hear what is normally seen. They're kind of what's called synesthesia. There's kind of a really wacky experience of something super sensory. And there's also this shofar, as you said. It's not even just a shofar, it's the shofar, kol ha-shofar. What shofar? There's something going on here that's totally overwhelming. And they say to Moshe, daber ata imanu v'nishma ve'al yidaber imanu Elohim penamut. So clearly God has been speaking to them in a way that they had hoped and thought that they would want. Right? In the words of Rashi, right? Rashi was saying that that Moshe tells God directly, we want to hear from you directly. And no sooner has that happened than they say, you know what, we think better of it. We thought it was going to be incredible, but on second thought, you, Moshe, stand in. We'd appreciate it if you would, why don't you do the honors? The very thing, actually, that Rashi imagines the people saying, right, to God, we want to really see you directly without any intermediary, becomes, right, in some profound way, in verse 16, the thing that they can't handle. They don't really want it. It's too much. Now, Moshe will respond to this, right? But let's go for a moment. Let's go. Let me take I see a couple of hands up, and then we're gonna come back to the text because I really want us to see some more development in this, and then bring it into our own hearts and our own practice. But go ahead. I think Jay has his hand up. Jay,
hi, Shabbat Shalom. Back on, I was struck by Rashi's interpretation of in 1921. I think it was either 4 or 5 on your source sheet. Yes, 5. I don't know if it works in Hebrew as well. I think it's matzevam. I was struck by this notion of standing, and I'm not a lawyer, but I know enough about what's been going on that the whole issue of standing is a very important legal concept. It's really, do you have the right to be in front of the court, in essence? And I was struck by this notion of wanting the boundaries set so that the people don't lose their standing, so that they don't lose their right to essentially hear the words or be witness to that event.
It's a strong word. Matzav is, it's great that you brought that. The word nitzavim, like atem nitzavim hayom. It's a Ugaritic term, which also means to be pulled together and to kind of be pulled in. We saw it last week with hityatzvu, right? Or et yishuat Adonai, like to be pulled into a situation. In modern Hebrew, matzav is a situation or the reality you find yourself in. And here, standing is pretty. It's a very, like, where you stand and what you are privy to, like what you said your rights are, it's a very strong way to say that. Shelo yehersu et matzavam. Yeah, there's something here about overreach, right? Overreach or over grabbing too much. That's implied in this, right? You're in good standing, but if you want more than what is arrogated to you, you will laros, you'll destroy, right, your standing. Thank you for bringing us to that, like making that association, that connection. Keith and Barbara. I don't know which one of you.
It's me.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
The number 6, where God grants the question of the Jewish people. I want to hear what's it say. We want to speak to God. We want God to be with us. and he comes, and I'm always struck by, okay, so thunder, lightning, really loud, this kind of decision on God's part to make a lot of noise and make it really scary. And I wonder about that. I wonder, about that choice, because it then, it creates fear and it pushes people away. I've even written a piece for solo flute and electronics based on this parshot, and because I was trying to imagine what it sounded like, and how that much sound, and I mean, it's something that people never experienced before, um, might be what the experience might be like, and then of course what the result is, which is this. I mean, to me, I probably would pull away too and go hide, and then God becomes hidden on some level. So that it always struck me as a very interesting choice
So
there.
so I don't want to. So I want to make sure that we get to a very different take on this. I don't want to end here. And what my fear here is, talk about my fear. My fear is that we're going to wind up staying here and in this text and not move forward into some later text that might actually have a completely different valence on what's happening here. So I kind of want to move at some point to the great Rav Nachman of Breslev, whom we're going to finish with. But I fully, I so resonate with what you're saying, because, this is certainly not the Kol D'Mamad Daka that we sang about 2 years ago, right? On the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, about the still small voice of Elijah. This is not the gentle caress of the divine. This certainly doesn't feel like, I don't want to gender this at all, because the Shekhinah in our tradition can also be very, if you look at a real, swath of Shekhinah text on the divine feminine, it's not always the gentle mother, as it were. There's a lot of energies in different directions. And so this kind of what we would call, maybe in the language of Rudolf Otto, the great German theologian, this is clearly the mysterium tremendum. This is the divine that appears not as the divine that is the still small voice, but the divine that shatters, right? Shatters a sense of comfort. This is the divine that is, in Heschel's terminology, that the role of the rabbi or the clergy or the leader is to make uncomfortable the comfortable, right? To kind of shake things up. This is this is troubling the waters, as it were, of your own sense of what you understand God to be. This is not the God of the later Zoharic literature that is, coming in the form of a child and so on. This is a bit scary, right? And you're right. The people do stand at a distance, but Moshe doesn't. And we'll see in a moment that Moshe's way will also become the way for all of us. Meaning, there's Moshe in the text, and then Moshe in me and you and all of us. And he offers us a very Buddhist, to use that. I mean, I'll show you that it's Buddhist. A very deep and profound, I think, technology for dealing with this. Good advice, as they say. So I see some more hands. I thank you, by the way. And Barbara, let it not be forgotten that you need to share that piece of music with all of us so that we can hear it.
I sent it to you just this morning, and to Rabbi Diane. Yeah. It's
Okay.
on YouTube.
How did I not get to it already? I'm sorry. I'll get to it after Shabbos. Okay, great. Leonard, and then Tony, and if everybody could take like a minute. Leonard, Tony, and then Jonathan. Then we're going to move forward. Go ahead, Leonard.
Can you hear me?
Now we hear you. Go ahead.
So you were talking about trauma and how do we deal with trauma. So I'm thinking about the first time someone might experience a psychotic moment, hearing a voice, and whatever that voice might be saying, it has to be very scary. And one way to deal with it is to turn it off, and just so what's the next step? You just so Moses says, just obey, just do it, and eventually you'll get past the trauma, because you'll see how wonderful things really are.
So thank you. I know, Leonard, this is your field, right? So I know that there's certainly, bringing in various parts of um, how people work with different mental states, different experiences of relating to what quote unquote is consensual reality, and certainly there's room in here to talk about like big traumas and small traumas, and I want to come back to what you said in terms of and later on in the Rav Nachman piece in about 10 minutes. Okay, thank you for that, Leonard. Thank you very much, Tony, and then Jonathan.
Well, first of all, I'm reminded of that great line in A Few Good Men. You want the truth, you can't handle the truth. And God, I think, is very frequently saying that to us. The truth, the love, my presence, etc. That's one. Two, frankly, I wonder whether the divine isn't our only trauma, ultimately. It's a question, but and it
what is it?
That the divine one,
Fine.
that our encounter with the divine is actually ultimately our only trauma. And it actually speaks to what Leonard just said of once you arrive more fully, you see how wonderful it all is. At least for me in my feverish head and heart, that it connects with that. And the other thing it connects with is my final point, which is I'm convinced that all that all the lightning and thunder and all that is partly of our own making. It's partly our own allergic resistance to the divine. There's a wonderful piece in Buber's Tales of the Hasidim's later masters called The Natural Way, where the Rebbe, I forget which Rebbe it is,
Moshe Leib
says, what's that?
Keep going. Go.
Yeah. Where he basically says, if somebody has perfect faith, it all happens naturally. There's no supernatural fireworks. It's just all is smooth and natural.
So I think that I take it in. I think that what you're saying, you said a lot of things. So, and I some of them I resonate with, some of them I have to. So the notion that all trauma is to some degree a relationship with the divine might be rooted, I think, in your understanding of what it is to be in avidya, right? Like ignorance itself and division. That fundamentally fear is always a subcategory of dualism, a subcategory of separation, and separation.
Yeah.
Right, separation from the divine is the primal separation from the ground of being, as it were, and that the emergence of the self, right, as a separate self, which is both necessary and to some degree lamentable in certain traditions, is the beginning, as it were, of all fear, right? And all fear is at the core of being overwhelmed, right? Because the self is overwhelmed by life. Right. This is why many traditions see birth as the first trauma of life. Right. One of the first traumas in life is being born. Right. Birth trauma. Yeah. And the whole rebirthing movement of Leonard Orr and others was itself trying to heal that primal split. Right. Yeah. And I'm with you. and then in some level, and then you went to some beautiful places too. The supernatural and the natural. I want to push back only on this, in that in our own interpretive modalities, when we come to these texts, like we can't, like the text is telling us something that we can either say isn't in our experience, or we can say we could say whatever we want. So we don't agree. We could say that's of our own making, but something in the tradition is saying that experience of the divine and then the experience in general can have the quality of kolot, of being, a light show, overwhelming, right? And on some level, the teaching is that we can become overwhelmed, right? We can be overwhelmed by it. And the question, of course, is what's the reason that we're overwhelmed? Is it because we're making up the light show? I think that might not be, maybe that's the answer, but I think that's a big question. I don't know that we're always the ones who are making it up. Sometimes it really is. And does feel like it's, overload in terms of sensory experience is just too much. So how we walk into those places, what's really interesting, I think, I just want to come back to this in a second, as Jonathan is going to share, is that even though there's a light show and even though there's lots of noise, where Moshe is and where divine revelation happens actually is not there, but in the dark cloud. And that's what we're going to get to in a second, because that's really what scares them, is that dark cloud, right? So we'll get there. Jonathan, thank you, as usual, Tony, for your very, wide nourishment. You just go very, very beautifully wide. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Well, first of all, I'm just feeling a lot of like shefa, like abundance. It's really nice to be sitting here with you folks, listening to a lot of wisdom and just, with my morning breakfast. It's really nice. So feeling gratitude. So thank you all. And I think the previous sharings have been really rich. So I'm not going to try to do anything smart. I'm just going to go right to a personal experience, which is like, I can totally relate to these people. Like, we have to read you can read this text however you want, but having been traumatized and having been in a holy setting where I was re-traumatized, you don't want to go there. And it messed me up for years, like a year or two. And these people are perceiving something terrible. Like they're walking in the desert. You don't have thunder in the desert, right? They've been slaves. They don't want enlightenment. They don't want lightning. Voice of a horn? Are you kidding? Like, this is terrifying. Like, it is, and it's not just and like not terrifying in the sense of the word. Like, this is terrifying in the sense of, I read this as somebody who's kind of been there, like, not kind of. They're saying, I'm at my limit. I'm gonna go nuts. I'm going to die, and I don't want to die. So it's easy to read this as people who are all secure sitting in a room with Zoom as something dramatic. This isn't just dramatic. This is like life and death to the people.
Shamati, I can very much relate as well. Like I can, to me, it's pretty obvious that you can have what's called a Shvirat Kelim. This is really a precursor to the great Lurianic idea that that there can be too much light and too much of a good thing, and that an experience that we don't have a vessel to hold can shatter us, right? And that's I can resonate with the truth of that for you, and the truth of that I have the exact experience, and I also have the experience of what Tony was speaking to, which is when the vessel is strong enough, right? Yeah. Then it's possible to then go back into this very same container and feel something that is, maybe was the quote unquote original intent. We'll see in a second, but thank you, Jonathan, for bringing your truth and speaking from your heart. And hearing also what needed to be put into the room. You were like, oh, other people put other things in that I might have said, but I don't need to add to that. That was great. And then you just brought something different that was unique to your own experience and enriched us with that. Thank you, Jonathan. L'chaim to you. I want to do a couple more of the teachings. I see hands up, but it's hard as a teacher to say no to people who want to share. But I need to do a couple more of these things because they're, here's source number 9. I would love it if to read this to you, and because of time, I just really I'm going to read this to you and translate as we go along in the Hebrew and the English. Okay, this is a remarkable midrash that speaks a little bit to what's happening here. Amar Rabbi Levi said, Shnei dvarim shalu Yisrael milifnei Kadosh Baruch Hu. There are two things that the children of Israel asked the Holy One: Shir'u kvodo, v'yishm'u kolo. They wanted to see God's glory and hear God's voice. And they got it. The Midrash here, the rabbinic commentary / folk construction here, quotes Deuteronomy 5. They said out loud, we've heard his voice from out of the fire, right? They see God. Our God has shown us God, our glory. We've seen God of the fire. In other words, we got what we wanted. V'lo haya. Here's so v'lo haya b'hem koach la'amod. Coming back now to Yair, right? Coming back to this beautiful Jay had said earlier, they couldn't stand it. That literally means they couldn't stand it. I can't stand it. I can't stand with it, in it. As soon as they arrived, the Midrash says, at Sinai, and God revealed God's self, they fainted and died. Their souls died. Shneimar, the Midrash here constructs this really wild notion that it says in Song of Songs, Nafshi yatsa b'dabro, that my soul leaves when I hear his voice. This is the lover saying, oh, right, the lover in the Song of Songs says, when you speak, it takes me away. And the way that the Midrash and the rabbis hear this is an allegory between Israel and God. And they read this as God, right, when I heard God's voice, nafshi, my soul leaves me, I died. Aval, so here says the Midrash, so beautiful. Aval ha-Torah biksha lehem rachamim. But the Torah came along and said, have mercy on them, God, right? Right? This is have mercy on them, God. Right? This is the end of the Midrash says, Yesh Melech, right? Masi bito. Is there a king who gives away his daughter to be married, right? And then kills the house? Kol haolam kol smechim ubanecha mesim. Right? Like here you're giving the Torah to the Jewish people, and the whole world is happy because the Torah is being given. And in other words, you're marrying your daughter, meaning the Torah is God's daughter being married to the Jewish people. And now people are dying. Miyad chazra nishmasan shenemar Torah Hashem timima mishivas nafesh. Immediately, as soon as the Torah came to speak on behalf of the Jewish people, she, as it were, resurrected their souls. Now, this profound midrash, right? This kind of like the Torah itself acts as an intermediary. In other words, the Torah is God's voice, but it's God's voice in a register that we can hear it. In other words, our relationship with Torah is the attenuated voice of the divine. It's not direct and immediate, but it's in words. It's a stepping down, as it were, of the experience. And there's no stronger, I think, midrash than this last one here on this. It says in the Torah, Anochi, we're in source 10, Anochi Adonai Elohecha. It says, I am the Lord your God, right? And it is written, right, Hashama Am Kol Elohim, right? Has a nation ever heard, a people ever heard the voice of the divine? The heretics asked Rabbi Simlai, are there many gods in the world? And so he asked them, why do you ask? They answered, because it's written, has the people heard the voice of Elohim in the plural, right? Kol Elohim, the word God, Elohim, is plural. Amar lahem, shema katuv midvarim, right? I'm sorry, shema katuv midabrim. It says midaber, right? In other words, he said back to them, if you're going to be very grammatically correct in looking at the Torah and in describing Revelation that God, Elohim, is God's, then why does the word Elohim always have the singular midaber instead of midabrim? So amru lo talmidav. So that was a good answer, right? So this is so wonderful in midrash. Sometimes this is you'll see this line. The students said to him, right? Dachita b'kaneh ratzutz. You have fobbed them off with a reed, meaning the students came and said, yeah, that was great that, but what are you saying to us? We know a thing or two, the students say, right? That was a good answer for someone like that. But what are you going to tell the real students, right? We know, we have a problem with this too. So, Chazar Rabbi Levi Upirsha, this is what it means. So Rabbi Levi explained to them, has the people ever heard the voice of God? If it had said the voice of God is in his strength, the world would not have been able to stand. Right? So we have a psalm that we say on Friday night. Kol Adonai b'kocho. Right? We say, right, in Psalm 29, we say the voice of God is in strength, b'koach. Lo haya olam yachol amod. If it would say the voice of God is in God's strength, right, the capacity of God, ela kol Adonai b'koach. The voice of God is in koach, in strength, not God's strength, but strength. B'koach shel kol echad ve'echad. Habachurim lefi kochan, hazekenim lefi kochan, haktanim lefi kochan. Right? The strength of God, the voice of God, the experience of the divine comes to each person according to their capacity, right? To contain it, to hold it. That's what it means, Elohim. When it says the voice of God is Elohim, right? And this guy said to him, right, this heretic said, wait a second, Elohim is plural. How many gods are there, right? How many gods are you talking about, right? And he says to him, right, he says to this certain rabbi says to this heretic, really, you're going to be grammatical with me? The word Elohim is plural, right? If that were the case, then it would have said, we heard the voices of Elohim speaking. It says the voice, there's only one voice. And the students came and said to this Rabbi Levi, he said to him, hey, wait a second. That's like a really overly simplistic answer. It might have satisfied someone who doesn't really understand, but we're concerned by it too. Why does it say Elohim? Right? And so he gives him a remarkable answer. He says, it says the voice, there's only one voice, but it's experienced as many voices. And the voice is Kol Adonai B'Koach. The voice of God comes to each person according to their capacity, their frames, their yicholet, their potential. And in a way, this is coming back to what Jonathan was saying and what was being said, that each person can stand where they are because they are responsible for the titration of their own experience of the truth, of their own experience of the light. And that actually is the way of it, that we are responsible to some degree to say too much. I need, that's too much, or that's not how I see it, or that's not the way that I experience it. That there is like an understanding that revelation or truth or even intimacy, if we want to read this more broadly as encountering the deep exposure that intimacy invites, the deep seeing through. There was a story of, we're doing in our class in the Hasidic Masters, we're doing the Berditchever, Lev Yitzchak Berditchev. And he was known as the tzaddik of the generation, the righteous one of the generation. He was venerated by thousands and thousands and thousands of students. And he was, just a visit from him to your city was a big deal, a really big deal. So there's a story that he was coming to Lublin, in Poland. He was coming to the city of Lublin, and there was a great leader of the Hasidic leader there called the Chose of Lublin, the seer of Lublin. And this Chose, this seer, this great rabbi known as the seer of Lublin, told all of his students to get dressed up in their Shabbos best because Lev Yitzchak Berditchev was coming to town. So all of them got ready, and they all went out to meet him. They all got dressed up in their Shabbat best. And one of the students stayed behind. And he kind of hid himself next to the room where the Chose, the seer, this great rabbi, was getting ready himself. And he overheard this conversation and he wrote it down. The seer of Lublin was pacing back and forth in the room, and he said, God, Master of the world, Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the world, Galu v'yadu lefanecha. It's known to you that I'm not a tzaddik, that I'm not a righteous person at all, but everybody here thinks that I am. And now the great tzaddik, Lev Yitzchak Berditchev, is coming to town, and he'll surely see through me. How can I possibly get dressed up when he'll expose me? And he was so worried. He said, what am I supposed to wear? He's going to see right through whatever I put on. He's going to see right through it. And the Berditchever actually knocked on the door to his study right at that moment, said the student. So in this moment of being seen, right, revelation is about the intimacy that Aviva Zornberg was speaking to, that it's sometimes the very encounter with the one who can heal brings up ambivalence and a titration of how open, how closed, how much, how is it too much, too little? That's intimacy in terms of our own memories too, our own experiences, how much we listen to them, how much we allow the memory to come out, and how much when we turn off the spigot. That kind of titration is really at play here in this revelation as koach, right? Like the koach of this one, the koach of that one. All right, so many beautiful hands. I'm going to, Joe, and then go ahead, Joe. Can't hear you. Now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Happy Sabbath. Thank you. That I just want to holler because you just spoke to my heart in ways that I just want to praise God and just jump up and down at the same time. So thank you. The point that you brought out about the voice was so powerful because one thing about music is sometimes you can't appreciate it unless you spend enough time with it. certain music or genres, you may not like it initially until you spend more time with it. And I saw this experience for the children as one in which reflected that they didn't spend enough time with God. And because of that, it was a traumatic experience. But for Moshe, he spent time with him. And so he could hear the melody of the voice of the trump. And it was beautiful to him. And so it's similar to recognizing that when the sun shines on something that can melt, it will because of the consistency. But if the sun shines on something that it has a different consistency inside of it, it can turn to stone. But it's the same sun. It just, its impact is different on the constituents of each entity or thing. And that's what we see here. And I find that when you spend more time with God, he then will appear to you like he did to Moshe. So thank you so much.
So I want to lift up what you're saying, and I want to shed some sunlight onto what you're saying. I alluded earlier to a teaching from the great grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, Rav Nachman of Breslov, the great grandson of the founder of the Hasidic movement. His name was Nachman, from the town of Breslov, and he wrote a very profound teaching that I've come to each and every year at this time in this parsha, where he reads the verse that says, "Vayamod ha'am merachok," that the people stood at a distance, "Moshe nigash el ha'arafel," and Moses entered the dark cloud. Then Moses, he said, knew that the secret was that when we begin our service of God, often there's a mini'ah, there's an obstacle that appears. And the obstacle, which would have us stand at a distance and not spend time, as you said, Joe, very beautifully, spend time in the light, as it were, of the divine, acclimating ourselves, becoming familiar with it, staying, right, and kind of setting up shop, being at home, as it were. That resistance, Rav Nachman of Breslov called a mini'ah, an obstacle. And Rav Nachman argued and instructed people that there's a Moshe in each and every one of us, like the biblical Moshe, who enters into the dark cloud, who enters into the place of not knowing, or into the place where God voice thunders, or that is, overly powerful to some degree. And Moshe comes inside, he says, Umishahu bar das, somebody who has awareness, or somebody who has developed witnessing, or the ability to stay inside of that obstacle, will enter into the obstacle and not be put at a distance. That he recommends the kind of titration, right, which is maybe, going in a little bit and then standing outside, but familiarity that comes from a willingness to stay inside of it, right, to the degree that you can, to get to know it. And this resistance, this kind of the way into resistance, is really at the hallmark of the way that Buddhists work with what are called the 5 hindrances, or the 5 obstacles. That when an obstacle arises, in the words of, these are the great words here of a number of Buddhist teachers, that you open up to that hindrance. You observe it without identifying with it or taking it as yourself. It's not my restlessness, right? It isn't this, right, that I own it, but there are sensations here, right? There is a composite of thoughts and feelings and sensations that are all, right, they come together to act as that doubt, as the dark cloud, but that we enter into it. And as you said, Joe, we become, we soften inside of it, and we listen to its new music, or what it's speaking to us, to the degree that we can. And in that way, as opposed to fighting it, or even resisting it or pushing it away, it becomes a source of wisdom, right? So this dance of revelation and ambivalence, right, has at its heart an invitation to intimacy. I'm going to call on Jeremy Alexander. I can't see where that is. Go ahead.
Hi, Rabbi David. It's Lauren.
Hi, Lauren. I was like, wait a second. I don't see Jeremy. There you go. Okay. Hi, Lauren.
Hi. So I was here. Jeremy's here. I was thinking beforehand that I wanted to get a cup of tea, but I'm so energized now from this conversation. Just so beautiful. Thank you. But I wanted to go back to this midrash that you shared about Elohim and how much I loved it. First, because I could, for 2 reasons. One, that I could understand the Hebrew for a change as a novice Hebrew student. But 2, because it's really the bio-individual approach to Judaism. That we all can absorb, we will all, just like our microbiome, we will all absorb the wisdom from Hashem differently. And just like we can change and alter our microbiome, as we now know, we can alter that relationship with Hashem, as Joe talked about. And that might mean by spending more time with the divine. There's different ways that we can get at it. But I just love the idea that we all are going to have this very individual, unique relationship.
I love that too, and I love that you brought that, right. I love that you focused on that. It is a remarkable midrash about the uniqueness of each person's experience, and that there isn't one size fits all revelation. There isn't one size fits all or one voice fits all. There are multiple voices, and all of them, the midrash ends by saying Anochi, right? Lest you think that they're not from the same source. They're all very different, but they're also, right, everyone according to their capacity. Very beautiful. And that you said beautifully. I only have time, so many voices here. I call on Eden, and then we'll see if we have another moment. So go ahead, Eden.
Hi, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I want to speak, this speaks a little bit to what Jonathan was saying. And whenever I study this and we talk about the Israelites here, I kind of feel like I'm on another planet because I experience it so differently. And it's fascinating to me that it becomes a conversation about intimacy and distance and the idea of ambivalence, because I'm really very much in the simple meaning of the text. And it feels to me that there's no ambivalence and that the only rational response is exactly the response that the Israelites have. They are given information about how dangerous this is, and they understand it and they obey. And I also feel like we're so hard on these people and they get, about sort of kvetching and not having faith. And here's a moment where there's no, or it feels to me a moment of profound acceptance of what's being asked of them. And also it feels like a sign of really serious spiritual maturity to know this isn't safe. And if they had disobeyed, if they had experimented or tried to be more intimate, what would the consequences have been? Would there have been anyone to receive the message at all, or would everyone have been obliterated? And I do think that there's an element of trauma and that I also think, having been enslaved, they understand power dynamics in a way that others might not. And so, yeah, I think it almost feels like to me that any rereading into this of the exploration of these different psychological experiences, and that maybe something about us being afraid of afraid of moving forward and afraid of freedom, it all feels so anachronistic to me. I feel like I just want to uplift them for doing what they're asked so they are able to receive what's being given. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that's I don't think we're gonna have much time for much more, but I think that I just want to say that it's nice that you come to their rescue. I think that if a reading of the Israelite people over the course of the beginning of the book of Exodus until this moment would not, I don't think, necessarily always be positive, in the sense of if we're just reading it on the simple meaning of the text. I mean, there are decidedly not an easy group of people to lead. They're not an easy group of people, notwithstanding the fact that they have been slaves. They still see, if we don't want to be anachronistic and just be in the text, I mean, they have just seen remarkable miracles occurring for them, and yet they still lack a certain trust and certain faith. A priori, even before there is revelation, there are signals of their own ambivalence vis-a-vis Moses, their ambivalence vis-a-vis being free, their ambivalence about, the whole project. They complain bitterly already. They haven't even, so there's all kinds of stuff. And at the same time, I think you're right. I think that later commentators who did not have the experience of standing at Sinai, as it were, when they read this text, can't help themselves but wonder why the people seem to be ambivalent in the text and stand at a distance. Like they take them to task for that. Of course, who is standing at a distance? All of those who ever read the story stand at a distance from the experience that is being written about. Like no one is standing at Sinai in France in the 11th century, or in they're standing in the midst of a vineyard, commenting on people and saying, like, if I were in their shoes, right? Like people who look at celebrities and are jealous of their fame, and then read about how much ambivalence there is about being famous, right? And being a superstar, and then realize how much suffering comes from all of that attention, and say, oh, big deal if I were that famous, right? Or if I was that, really? So I think that you're right to lift them up, as you usually do, in having compassion for their position. I think that for all of us who for whom this story is it's a very lived story, in the sense of things that overwhelm us, and things that we think we want, but then when we have them, we're not so sure we wanted them. Right. This is also a very cautionary tale about the great truth that I think that all the spiritual traditions seem to echo, which is the great disappointment in life is not getting what you wanted, and there's also another great disappointment, which is getting what you wanted, and that the nature of that itself, or the nature of how things continue to to be in a very complicated relationship with our own healing and our own evolution. I think that's what we were trying to bring out. So I thank all of you. We're a couple of minutes over. We're going to come back to the beginning of the parsha at 11:15. We hope you'll stay tuned for that. But for now, Asher Kochachem, strength to all of you. And we're going to just take about a minute to put on our prayer for Nelia and to get ready for this morning's davening. Asher Koach. שנסעת בתיאורה כי אתה בראת, אתה יצרת, אתה נפחת בי, ואתה משמרה בקרבי, ואתה עתידי לה ממני. ולהחזיר רבי ליאסי לבוא כל זמן שנשמה בקרבי, as long as I breathe. Breathing is the doorway between the conscious and unconscious functionings of this body that I inhabit, that I am. Thank you for the gift. Baruch atah hamachazir nishamos lifgarim mesim. If you are able this morning to please rise on your feet, to feel your feet on the floor beneath you as you bounce slightly, just feeling the natural relaxed position of your head on the top of your spine as it floats, dropping the chin ever so slightly without any tension, just imagining and using imagination as one of the most powerful vehicles for the body's own transformation. Imagining as if the top of your head were being suspended from thousands of miles away, right? Just held up, not through any effort of your own, but just being held, as it were, by the great alignment that we are. And so as you bend your body and as you bounce your body, feeling that natural cranial sacral pump moving all of the fluid, the vitality, all of the chiyut, up and down the tree of life and into the limbs and into the branches, as we prepare for the Berachot HaShachar together with Rabbi Rivera and with Ben Pearlstein. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan nasach vivina lehavchin ben yom uven laila, for consciousness itself.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shesani betzalmo, you make me in your image.
Amen. Ruchat Shechina Eloteinu Ruach Haolam Shasani Ben Chorin. You make me free.
Amen. Baruch atah Yah Eloheinu Ruach Haolam Shasani Yisrael, for the royal, princely, princess, the integrity of each and every human being.
Amen. Baruch Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Malbish arumim, you clothe me when I'm vulnerable.
Amen. Ruchat Shekhinah Eloteinu Ruach Haolam Pokachat Ivrim, for uncovering the ability to see.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ruach haolam. Malbish arumim, for the sense of our skin as a powerful agent on which we are clothed.
Amen. Bruchat Shekhinah Eloteinu Ruach Haolam, Zokefet Gefufim. You straighten me when I'm bent over.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim, for unshackling places of constraint and locked upness.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, rokar hatzalamayim, for the ground that we stand on.
Amen. Bruchat Shekhinah Eloteinu Ruach Haolam Hamechina. Mitzadek Gaberet, you give me firmness under my steps.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asali kol tzorki, for giving me everything that I need, even when I don't remember that I have it. Everything I need.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Hotel Yisrael b'sifara, for the purpose that all of us remember every now and then, that keeps us aligned with our highest place.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Ozer Yisrael bigvurai, you give us strength.
Amen. Bruchat Shekhinah Eloteinu Ruach Haolam, Hanotenet leYa'ef Koach, for giving strength to the weary.
Amen. Baruch atah ya Eloheinu melech haolam, Hama'avir she'ena me'enai usnumam yafapai, for removing sleep and sleepiness and giving us the potential of this body and this brain to cleanse itself each and every night, and to be able to make room for newness and for freshness and for something remarkable to happen, and the blessing and the wonder of each and every day. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ruach haolam. For all of these blessings this morning, take 30 seconds, everyone, as you count and enjoy the blessings of this morning for you, wherever you are. For the blessing this morning.
Blessings of togetherness.
Amen. For all of these blessings that were shared, that were felt, that were enumerated, that were noticed, that will be noticed, we say together, Amen. Baruch Shema, we begin Psukei de Zimra with a reminder that Shabbat is a day to use our speech creatively by sometimes not saying less today than we might normally say, so that we might say more with what we do say. V'haya olam baruch hu, baruch omer Yosef, Baruch gozer umekayim, Baruch mirachem al haaretz, Baruch mirachem al habrios, Baruch mishalem sachar tov l'riyah b'chai la'ad, v'kayam la'netzach, Baruch b'der matzil, Baruch shmorat Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hayela v'rachaman, hamla b'fe'amon b'shubach, umfor b'shon chasidav v'avadav, ובשירי דוד עבדך נעללך יא אלוהינו, בשבחוס ובזמירוס נגדלך ונשבחך ונפארך. יחידך עולמים, מלך משובח ומפרדע שמו הגדול, ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מעולל, מדיש בחובוס. So into King David's world we enter, the Shirei David Avdecham, into the world of prayers as poetry. No greater poem than Psalm 145, as we are aware of what shelter is, of what it means to be musharim, to be satisfied in some way with what we have, to be ashirim, really. To be really wealthy is to be really mu'usharim, to be content. Rabbi Amir, would you lead us in the prayer of contentment, the Ashrei Yoshvei?
אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך סלם. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך סלם. אשרי העם שככה לו, השם שאדוני אלוהיו תהילת לדוד. I open up my hands fan out, and I reach out to the great hand that opens to us, and also Yedecha, your hands. פותח את ידיך ומשפיע לכוח הרצון. פותח את ידיך ומשביע לכוח הרצון. And as for us, ואנחנו נברכיה מעתה ועד עולם. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Psalm 150. Hallelujah, Bikacho. Hallelujah, Bikiauzo. Hallelujah, Bigurotav. Hallelujah, Kirov Gulo. Hallelujah, Tega Shofar. Hallelujah, Never Bechinor. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Ben, would you take it?
Die, 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 die. Hallelu b'tofu machol, Hallelu b'minim ve'ugav, Hallelu b'tziltzilei shama. Yadidai, Hallelu b'tziltzilei trua, kol anshama tehallel, Hallelu kol anshama tehallel. Hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.
Too low for you, huh? Hallelujah. 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 The color neshama, the hallelujah, everyone. Take a couple of breaths. Let's take a couple of deep, deep breaths. And if you want to really connect not just with the music of this, but in place of this breath, if you want to place a hand on the chest and one hand on the belly, taking a deep breath into the entire torso, allowing the entire rib cage and all of it to expand ever so gently as we breathe in together. More breaths in. Taking a couple more deep breaths in. So with extra breath we sing the songs that come with, oh wow, more breath, more song, more sound. Nishmat kol chai. We have extra Tehillim on Shabbat, but we're saying fewer of the Psalms and breathing gently. So nishmas kol chai, tilarech es shimecha, Hashem Eloheinu, nishmas kol chai, tilarech es shimecha. With every breath we praise you. ורוח כל בשר תפאר ותרומם זרח המקים תמיד ונאום לעולם לעולם אתה אל כל יצר וצוקה לנו מנמק אתה ראשונים ואחרונים אדם כל תולדו סברו ולא תשבחוס גם מנהג עולמו בחסד ורחצה ברחמים ואדוני לא ינום לאישן המאורי שאינים ימקיץ נרדמים ימסיך אילמים We remember now all gestures, valuable, beautiful, point to you, but are not you. We thank you for singing songs of praise, beyond songs of praise that came before us, each of us praising life with what we have here in this moment. האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא אל עליון, קונה שמיים וארץ. נעללך ונשבחך ונפארך ונברך את שם קודשך. כמוד דוד ברכי נפשי אשא אדוני וכל קרבי. את שם קודשו ילבש ומסוסך. הגדול בכבוד שמך. הגיבור לנצח והנורא בנורותיך. המלך היושב על כיסא רם וניצב, שוכן מרום וקדוש שמו וחסון. רננו צדיקים באדוני לישרים נבעתי להם.
Yai rai rai, 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 yai yai yai, yai rai rai, yai rai rai. שוכנת מרום וקדוש שמו, שוכנת מרום וקדוש שמו. בפי ישרים תתרומם, תתרומם, ובדברי צדיקים, צדיקות, תתברך, תתברך.
שכנת מרום וקדוש שמו, שוכנת מרום וקדוש שמו.
ובלשון חסידים תתקדש, תתקדש, ובקרב קדושים תתהלל, תתהלל.
שוכנת מרום וקדוש שמו, שוכנת מרום וקדוש שמו.
ובמעקלות ובבעוד עמך בית ישראל, וינשית בשמך מגן בכל דור ודור, שכן חובת כל היצורים, לפניך אלוהינו להורינו להודות הלל לשבח לפאר ולברך לעלי ולקלס על כל נראה שינוס ותשבחוס ein David ben Yishai Avdecha Meshichecha. Please rise if you're able as we conclude this portion of our morning prayers. Yishtabach Shimecha Yishtabach Shimecha Lo ad malkeinu el melech hagdol v'kadosh v'shamayim u'va'aretz hinechane Adonai Eloheinu v'Eloi horeinu shehu shvachal el v'zimra u'zumem shalad natach g'lavra kila v'tiveri k'dusha malchus v'rachos v'hodaos me'ata v'yad olam baruch ata Adonai El melech ganam tishbachos El ahodos Adon haniflos Hamoche b'shirei zimra Melech elechei haolamim. Chatzi Kaddish, everyone.
יתגדל ביתקדש שמי רבה. במה דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ובימיכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה וזמן קריב ואמרו
אמן. ישמר רבה מבורך לעולם ולמי עמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר וישרום וישנשא ויסדר ויסלל ויסלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכסה ושירסך תשוחסה ונחם עשה דמירן בעלמא אין לרסי אמן. Good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom.
Good Shabbos, good Shabbos.
A big embrace, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Oh,
We're
that
gonna.
we would be in community. Oh my goodness.
It's beautiful from all over, So, into these small little boxes are people with names and places that they are, and emotionally, like, where are you this morning? So we're gonna have a really brief breakout group for everyone. If you don't want to share, that's cool, but we hope that you will. We hope that you'll find a way to come off of the anonymity for a moment and just to say your name and maybe share with the 3 people or in your group just what you're bringing this morning, where you are, not more than 3 minutes together in the breakout room. So we're going to do that right now, and then we'll rejoin. We'll come back together in about 3 or 4 minutes for the Baruch Hu moment, but take this time to say hello to 1 or 2 people and to unmute yourselves, and see you soon. wonder if we have anybody who's here for the first time. Any first timers? Anyone here this morning? First time? Love to see if there are. Diddy night, ya da 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 da. Please rise, everyone, as you stand on your feet. Take a look around the room, the Zoom room. Take a look and see. And maybe if you know somebody in this room, on the inside we say, I call and respond, I hear and I am here. To be in community is to be response-able. To hear a call and to respond to it. When someone says, Baruch Hu, you say, Baruch Hu et Adonai Vorach. And so as we come together at this moment, we recognize that now, as it has been the case, I think, for forever, each human being must be lifted up. And we say at this moment that this community is a place where how you love and what you look like, the thoughts in your different creeds, the different religious traditions and spiritual traditions that come through these doors, that we are all made in the image of that which can't be reduced, that which can't be denied, that which can't be and should never be desecrated. Each and every human being an image of the divine. And so the widest possible embrace of humanity as we call to one another, acknowledging that source. Baruch Hu es Adonai, ay da 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 da, Hamevorach. Baruch Adonai Hamevorach Leolam Va'ed. You may be seated, everyone. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Yotzir or uvorei choshech Oseh shalom uvorei es hakol. Forming light, creating darkness, making peace, creating all. Hakol yoducha v'kol yishabechucha v'kol yomrei kadosh k'Adonai Eloheinu hakol yiramemucha sela yotzer hakol hayala b'odeh v'kol yom datot shari mizrach. As we make our way, kulam ahuvim, kulam birurim, v'kulam osim ema v'yira ritzon ekonam, v'kulam poschim, asbiyam b'gusha u'v'tara u'v'shira u'v'zimra, u'mvarchim u'shabechim u'foarim, maritzim akdishim, ומעמליכים משם אל המלך הגדול. ונוסנים בשוס באהבה זה לזה להקדיש יוצרם. בנחת רוח בשפה ברורה ובנעימה, קדושה כולם כאחד עונים. V'yomrim b'yirah. Kadosh, 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 Havayat Tzvaot Melochol Haaretz Kevodo. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot. The whole world is filled with your glory. The whole world is filled with your glory. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Adonai Tzevaos. The whole world is filled with your glory. The whole world is filled with your glory. Miofani v'chayos HaKodesh b'rash gadol, מתנשאים לעומת שרפים לעומתם משבחים, ואומרים בו כבוד אדוני ממקומו. לאל ברוך מעמדיתנו, למלך אל חי וקיים, זמיעות יאמרו ותשפחות ישמיעו. We invite you in this moment, as we make our way, paving the way for the Shema.
Taking a breath in, taking a breath in, to hear Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם, ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת, והיו לכם לציצית, וראיתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אמת ויציב, in truth. In truth, we are held up, and in truth forever.
From truth to freedom can sometimes feel. It is often felt that it takes decades, centuries to traverse from truth to freedom, from emet to geula. So we sing a song, may it come soon, may freedom, liberation, may the marriage of emet and geula. No, enough with the long engagement. We want a marriage already. We want it to be so clear as emet, that Tehilot le'el elyon baruch hu mivorach, Moshe u'Miriam uvnei Yisrael, lechanu shira b'simcha rabba, ve'ameru chulam, mi chamocha, va'elim Adonai, mi kamocha, nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilos, osei fele, shira chadasha, shebechu geulim, לשמחה שפתיים יחד כולם. הונו ומליכו ויאמרו, אדוני מלך לעולם ועד. Please rise if you are able, Tzor Yisrael. קום מעזת ישראל ותכינו ממך יהודה וישראל. גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש Yisrael. As we stand together for freedom, we take a moment inwardly to say, may freedom come, may freedom come, may freedom come, and may we all sing a song of freedom, of liberation, of human dignity and human flourishing. Baruch atah Adonai Gal Yisrael. Adonai Svatai Tiftach. Ancestors, come and be with me in this moment. Sweet grandmother, sweet grandfather, great-grandfather, great-grandmother, all the Rebbes, all the Bodhisattvas, all of the righteous ones. I lean back into you, and I bring you forward with me and with this community. Baruch atah Havaya Eloheinu, Elohei Horeinu, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, El Hagadol, Hagibor, והנורא אל עליון, גומל חסדים וטובים, וקוני הכל, וזוכה חסדי אבוס ואימהוס, ומביא גאולה לבני בניכם למען שמו, מאהבה מלך עוזר, ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ויעזרה שרה, אתה גיבור, לעולם אדוני, מחיה משימתה, רב להושיעה. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים מחסד, מחיי מתים, ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים, ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי די מלך, מי מסמכיה, ומצמיח ישוע, ונאמנת לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו, מי שמגמרו. ככסו היד, אני אביך, וקרא זה אל זה, דינאי נאי, דינאי נאי נאי Nini nai 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 nai. Nini nai nai nam. Nini nai nai nam. Nini nai 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 nai. Hai nai 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 nai. Nini nai nai nai. Nini nai nai nam. Nini nai 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 nam. Dini nai nai nam, dini nai nai nam, yam bam bam ya 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 yam bam bam. Dini nai nai nam, dini nai nai nam, dini nai nai nai, dini nai nai nam, dini nai nam, dini nai nam. Dini nai 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 ay 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 ay. Dini nai 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 ay ay. Nai 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 ay ay. Dini nai nai nam. Dini nai nai nam. Dini nai 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 nai. Lai 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 lai. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivos, Velochol Arz Kivados, V'kol Rash Gadol, Adir Chazak Mashmi V'kol, Nisnasim U'masrafim U'masam, Baruch Yomeru, Baruch Yevod Adonai, Mimekomo. ממקומך מלכנו סופיה ושים אלוך עלינו כי מחכים אנחנו לו רוח מסעי תנח מציון וקרוב בימינו מקרוב בימינו לעולם לא תשכון דידי נאי 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 Yai nai 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 nai. Ay ay ay. Ay 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 ay. Dinin alay nay. Ay 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 ay. Ay ay ay. Dinin alay alay. Ay 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 ay. ימלוך אדוני לציון, לדוב אדור, הללויה, לדוב אדור נגיד הולך לנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי המלך גדול וקדוש אתה ברוך, אתה אדוני, מאל HaKadosh. I invite you all to take 2 or 3 minutes now in your silent prayers as we prepare to receive Torah this morning. Yismach Moshe. This is one of Reb Zalman's original from my teacher. Hear the English words today.
Oh, how good and oh, how nice it is for brothers and sisters to dwell as one. Oh, how good and oh, how nice it is for brothers and sisters to dwell as one. I shall dwell in God's house. You shall dwell in God's house. We shall dwell in God's house now and always. I shall dwell in God's house. You shall dwell in God's house. Hey, ושבתי בריזה כל ימי חיי. בבא Hine ma tov u'ma na'im. Then we bring all of the children and all of the people under our talit, under our prayer shawl for the children's blessing at this moment. Rabbi Mira, would you bless us with the blessing for the children? We reach out and bring them under the talis. My kinderlach are making snowmen outside, so I'm going to bring them in energetically from their snowmen.
If you do that, then I'm bringing my children energetically too. As we all are, Bob Schloss is holding up the talit for all of us. Yevarechecha Adonai ve'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha ויחנך, יישא אדוני פניו אליך, וישם לך שלום, וישם לך שלום. שלום, שלום, שלום. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Shalom, shalom, shalom. V'yasem lecha shalom. May these wings of God, las alas de Dios, como se llamaba mi abuelita, as my grandmother and my great-grandmother used to call these hands that she would place on our heads. V'yasem lecha shalom.
Amen. All right, everyone, we pause with an Aramaic Kaddish Shalem. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
V'yalma divrach irutei v'yamlich machudei v'chayechon v'yomechon u'v'chayedecho b'Yitro b'agala v'zmanon kori v'yimeru.
Amen. Yeheshme Rabba mevorach. Le'olam olal me'almaya yitbarach. Bishtabach v'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar. v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei dekudesha.
Richu.
לאלה מכל ברכתה בשירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמרן בעלמא ואמרו.
Amen.
תתקבל צלות הון ובהות הון, דכל בית ישראל, קודם אבוהון דבשמיא ואמרו.
Amen. Yehi Shlomo Rabba Mishmaya. May thee be great peace. Aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'yimeru.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'imromav. U'berachamav yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'yakol yoshvei tevel. And let us say, Amen. Seder Hotza'at Sefer Torah, the removal of the Torah from the ark. Please rise if you are able.
Bam Ein kamocha ba'Elohim Adonai v'ein kemasecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha bechol dor v'ador. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed, Adonai oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom. Ava rachamim. היטיבה ברצונך את ציון, תבנה חומות ירושלים, תבנה חומות ירושלים, כי בך לבד בטחנו, מלך אל רם ונישא, אדון עולמים ידעי. ויהי בנשוא אהרון, ויאמר משה, קומה אדוני ויפוצו אויביך וינוסו משנאיך מפניך, כי מציון תצא תורה, כי כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר אדוני מירושלים. ברוך שנתן תורה תורה, ברוך שנתן תורה תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו. בריך שמהן מרים.
Israel, Asrach, Sach, and Mamak, is Amtuna, and Lana, Tumito, Nara, the Chabal, Sosan Rachamim, Tarnana, Dorichin. Ana Abdul Kujabi, who the Sagid Nakame, Makamika, right, say the Holidan with Allah, Al Enesh, Rachitna, Valabar Lohin, Samichna, and Avalashmod, Nuvaik Shot, Leana Rachin, so Lishmai Kaddish, Yakim.
בהנרחץ מלישמי קדישה קדישה יקירה הנאמר תושפכן בהנרחץ בהנרחץ מלישמי קדישה קדישה יקירה אנא אמר תושפכן. היי רבה קדמך דתפתח ליבי באורייתא ותשלים משלין דליבי וליבה דכל עמך ישראל לטבו לחיים ולשלם. אמן. Toira, 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 toira.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonai, Kadosh Shmo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shmo.
Gadolu Adonai Yeti, Onera Mimashema Yavedav. Lecha Adonai Hagedula V'Hagevura V'Hativet V'Hanetzach V'Yahod Ki Chol B'Shamayim U'Va'aretz Ki Chol B'Shamayim U'Va'aretz Lecha Adonai Hamamlecha V'Yaminatz Lechol Rosh Romemu
Romemu,
Romemu
Romemu.
Adonai Eloheinu v'yishtachavu lehar kodesho. Romemu,
Romemu,
Romemu.
Romemu.
Adonai Eloheinu v'yishtachavu lehar ki kadosh. Havaya Eloheinu.
Torah, 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 ki mitzion tצא Torah, udvar Adonai miRushalayim. Ki mitzion tצא Torah, udvar Adonai miRushalayim. Ay, ay, ay.
Ki mitzion tצא Torah, udvar Adonai miRushalayim. Im mitzion etzet Torah, ודבר אדוני מירושלים. You can all be seated if you're not already, please.
At the base
This
of
morning,
the mountain.
Kriyat Torah.
At the base of the mountain.
That's where we are. We're
As
at the
it
base
were.
of the mountain, exactly. But before we get to the base of the mountain, actually, what happens before we get to the base of the mountain actually is maybe more important than what happens at the mountain. If we are to read this Torah portion appropriately and accordingly, and in this, I wanted to just ask you, Rabbi Amir, did you prepare a separate open up, or are we going to be?
I am following you right along.
Okay, cool. All right. So, just want to make sure. So, Vayishma Yitro, Kohen Midyan. This morning's Torah reading will begin with the most remarkable and strange gathering. Right, every year when we come to Parshat Yitro, this parsha of that is the first parsha after the children of Israel are pretty much out of danger. Right, so danger is behind them. In fact, literally, if you read in the chronology of this morning's Torah reading, the verse that immediately precedes this verse of introducing the parsha is basically last week there was a war between the Israelites and their arch enemies, Amalek, right? So just to follow this chronology, kind of really important. Like this is like, Bible 101, Torah 101. If you haven't ever studied Torah, I certainly didn't learn this in my yeshiva training. I certainly didn't learn it growing up. But what we do know is that Torah gives us allusions and hints as to how it wants to be read. At least that's the way the rabbis read the Torah. That when pieces of Torah are juxtaposed, right, the narrative is a flowing narrative, and when there are pieces of Torah that are juxtaposed, that are adjacent to one another, where there is, right, they're in the same neighborhood, the Torah wants us to learn from that relationship, from that juxtaposition. So last week, in As the Torah Turns, last week's Torah portion ended with Amalek, with this arch enemy of the Jewish people, who have attacked the Israelites when they are vulnerable, when they are weak. And they come to represent in Jewish history, right, the outsider who is to be feared. The outsider or the enemy that is, maybe ontologically in who they are born that way. There's an Amalek, right? There's some nemesis. They are their arch rival. In fact, that's actually the reading of the rabbinic tradition says that there are two reshits, there are two beginnings. One is called Reshit, the beginning of Israel, right? We are called Reshit. And Amalek is also called Reshit. They're also the beginning. They're like mirror opposites of each other, right? That's the way that the polarities in the rabbinic mind. So there's Amalek and then there's us. And last week, we ended the Torah portion with, we're free, uh-oh. We're free, uh-oh. And Amalek comes, right? And there's a war. And we're not even sure, actually, if we're gonna win or not. The text makes it very clear that when Moses' hands are emunah, when they're held up, and he needs help to hold them up because they keep going down. And as they go up, we win, and as they go down, we lose. And then they go up and we win, and it's a battle to the end, right? And who's gonna win? And we win, and we're victorious. Ki yadal kes yam milchama Adonai ba'amalek midor dor. That the end of the Torah portion is that this is not just once but always. And then the Torah introduces a very different image of an outsider who is named Jethro, Yitro, whose name means yeter, addition, not subtraction, addition. Who the letters of his name Yitro have within them the letters. Most of the letters of Torah. There's a whole thing there. Torah, Yitro, Ruth also. The outsider who comes, Vayishma Yitro Kohen Midyan. At Kolat Lasher, like he comes, he hears something. He comes to join the Jewish people. And when he comes to join the Jewish people, the Israelite nation, as they prepare for revelation, he acts as a buffer between revelation at Sinai and Amalek. In between Amalek and Sinai, there is the Jethro character and all that he brings, all that he is, all that he right? All of his profound journey. And the text will tell us that this character, Yitro, of course, he is the father-in-law of Moshe. Moshe has three father figures, right? He has Amram, Pharaoh, and Yitro. Moshe, right, and the reverence that Moshe has for Jethro is remarkable. Jethro, we're told, comes. He brings Tzipporah. He brings the two children of Moshe Rabbeinu, Eliezer and Gershom, and we're told that he is someone who has heard all the things that God did for the Jewish people and how miraculous it was. It's a very beautiful image, right, of this father figure who comes to listen to Moshe's experience, to come and to have sympathetic joy with the Jewish people, as the Buddhist teacher would say, Vayichad Yitro, he actually gets excited, right, for all of this. And what's lost sometimes when I used to read this, and the way I can't ever not read it going forward, is that not only does Yitro come as the absolute opposite of the Amalek experience, the outsider that isn't dangerous, but the outsider whose presence adds, doesn't subtract, as the outsider who's remarkable, who is not only trustworthy, but necessary. The text says that without Yitro showing up now, it's as if we can't arrive at Sinai unless we bring along Yitro. That to some extent, the Israelite nation that stands poised to receive this very unique, particularistic Jewish revelation, we are, first and foremost, we hear a revelation from a Midianite priest. He brings his wisdom, and his wisdom becomes codified in the Torah. The wisdom of Jethro becomes itself Torah. It's not just the story of Jethro, because he's not just a character in the story that has to bring Moses's wife and two children like that. He doesn't serve only that function, because while he's there, he gives Moshe advice on how to lead an organization, how to lead the people, right? It's not just he comes and drops off the kids and then leaves the scene. This character, who is the exact opposite of the Amalekites, the exact opposite of that which should be feared, right? The outside world, those who are, they're always against us. Along comes Yitro, and he says, not only am I part of your family, but I'm also part of your Torah. In fact, your Torah is going to give me space. Before God reveals the Torah, Jethro will reveal Torah. And so it's just like every year it blows my mind. Every single year I get blown out of the water when I realize that before there was Torah at Mount Sinai, before there were the 10 utterances, before there was the great light show, the Charlton Heston business, before any of that mystical, trippy, amazing moment at Sinai, there's the simple moment of an interaction between a quote-unquote outsider who has become a part of Moses' family, who then gives Moshe great advice that becomes part of our Torah. It's like blows my mind. Here I grew up as an Orthodox kid, and then later on when I became super Jew and super Orthodox guy, if you would have told me that before there was the Jewish Torah, there was the Torah of Jethro, and that Torah would have precedence. And how many people here in this Zoom room and beyond have gone to Thich Nhat Hanh, have gone to the great Torahs of the Buddha and the great Torah of Freud and the great Torah of Jung before they ever walked into Sinai? In fact, they couldn't even have arrived at Sinai without those other Torah in tow. Someone who goes to a Krishna Das concert, who, by the way, would always say, Krishna Das always says, I'm Jewish only on my parents' side. Walks into a Krishna Das concert and Krishna Das is singing and opening the heart, and all of a sudden you think, oh, wow, okay. That bhakti is that dveikut. I get it. Bhakti, dveikut. Oh, amazing. How many people need, and not only need it, but actually have gone this way? And the Torah says, yeah, that's great. Moshe did it too. See, Moshe was sitting at the feet of the Kohen of Midian, the priest of Midian. It was his father-in-law. And his father-in-law taught him Torah. And so I front that as we open up the Torah this morning. And I say one more thing, and then I'll hand it over to you, Rabbi Rivera. I front that because in the conversation about in the conversation in our country, in the conversation in the world at large about what the contributions of quote unquote the other are, the contributions of those who are quote unquote coming from afar. When we think about how powerfully impacted we are by the notion that you have come to contribute, not to detract, that you haven't come to threaten, but to illuminate, that you have a gift, and that I want to receive that gift. We don't often think about the lesson of Yitro as it focuses on Yitro's actual advice, right? He tells Moses that if you're going to try to do this all by yourself, no way. You're going to, you're going to fall apart. You can't hold everything, Moshe. You have to delegate. But we don't think often about Moshe's own capacity to hear the Torah of Jethro, that his coachability, that that Moshe had room and wisdom enough to know that as he turned to his father-in-law and his father-in-law diagnosed an issue, that his father-in-law came, right, not to detract, but to offer something additional that he might not have known. And that was also Moshe's great wisdom, that he wants to impart to each and every one of us, is to open ourselves to receive wisdom from wherever it comes, and to open ourselves to hearing Torah from everyone. That if we're only preparing ourselves to be standing at the mountain, as Ben just said, here we are at the mountain, we're going to miss the revelation that precedes the mountain. We're going to miss the capacity that maybe even the prerequisite to receive Torah at the mountain is to be able to first and foremost receive Torah from wherever it shows up, like to identify it and to make ourselves ready to receive it and desirous of receiving it. Because not everyone who shows up is an Amalekite. And not everyone who shows up is here to detract, and not everyone who comes from the outside, right, has come to threaten. God forbid, right? That's the prerequisite for receiving Torah, is to be able to hear Torah from wherever it comes. Over to you, Rabbi Rivera.
Receiving Torah from wherever it comes. So we're not going to focus for a moment, Rob, on the what of the Torah, what is being revealed here, but on the how. Okay, so you've heard me many times make allusions to dance, because that is what I know, right? That I know mibifnim, like from my cell, even though my body can't do all of it anymore. But when you see a dance performance, you would see the leap, and then maybe the stretch there, and you would see the turn, and then you would go, wow, wow, wow. But when I learned, coming from the Martha Graham school of being of that kind of performance, where we would hit and this big moment and that pitch, I learned from one of my teachers, Gabriel Tab Darbash, pay attention to the transitions. Mm-hmm. The stuff that happens between that leap onto the stage, and then how you negotiate that turn, but all the stuff in between, like listening to the words between the words. So the how of revelation, specially seeded, planted inside this Torah reading named Yitro, named after this human being who's not an Israelite, but who is, we hear of his stature. He is a Kohen, he has stature, not just anybody. And then there's a connection. Oh, he's connected to Moshe Rabbeinu. He is connected to who has led us, who is leading us, and who is sort of like our beacon right there at the forefront. And it is connected to one who listens, right? He listens. They say, Rashi says, Yitro heard. What was that particular report that he heard? Two things at the beginning. This phenomenon that the sea split, and hence the people went through. And then there was this war that Rabbi David was referring to, the war with Amalek. And the implication here was that here was this, let's say, religious figure, a ritual figure, also had awareness of who was a neighbor, right? A neighbor on the other side who was maybe like tyrant, number one at that moment, and then the one that we left behind, right? The unmentioned, he who would not be named, but one was named and one was not named anymore. So he heard, so I would say I'm going to pull out one ear here. So this ear heard about the phenomenon, and then this other ear heard about, ear to the ground, about what's really going on next door. So what an example that the centrality of Jewish, right, of Torah is seated in this. One who hears of a phenomenon, like he allowed his heart to be awed, and another one of like also hearing what is the rumble on the ground. So the how of revelation here does not begin with do this and don't do this, thou shalt and thou shalt not, but it begins in a father that connects to one who did not, whose father figure was where was he? It begins with a relationship built out of marriage. And it begins with a relationship of advice. The how of revelation here begins with, as Rabbi Diane brought us into last night, begins with intimacy. Whether we like it or not, con la familia, b'mishpacha, there is intimacy. They know you. They love you. Even though sometimes we don't want to call it love, they see you. The how of revelation here happens not in, like what Rabbi David was saying, a Charleston Heston. I had to look up Charles, what? How do you say his name?
Charlton.
Oh, I thought Charleston. No, like the dance? No.
Name. I'm kidding.
Heston. Okay. I said Charleston, like da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, the big fire and brimstone, the big movie moment.
No,
right?
not out of him.
Not there. It's not in the big light show.
No, not out of him, but with a simple one-on-one with two people. Imagine after the crossing of the sea, Moshe takes his family to go and meet him first. I mean, what kavod. Like, he was home. He was home. So, the how of revelation.
Can I add something to what you're saying? I want to add something. And this, I want to make the turn into the open up this morning, but I want to, so I loved what you were saying about that it's about the transitions. You were saying it's about these beautiful moments. And this is, as if Mount Sinai is the great, the gesture that is obvious, and if Amalek and the splitting of the sea are also in these moments, as you said in Martha Graham's work, or this kind of remarkable moment that draws the eyes, the great dancers, as you said, are drawn to the transition moments, and great speakers are drawn to transitions. And in our lives, right, the mezuzahs, as it were, the places where we pass from one state to another, right, these liminal spaces where we go, like that's where we bring our moment, mind the gap, they might say if you were in England, like minding the gap, right, mind the gap, right, the transition between one and another. And Yitro becomes a kind of mezuzah person here, right? He tells us to be mindful of the space between what came before and now. And I particularly want to underscore something that you said about Moshe and about their relationship, and how it might also be an open up moment. We all know that that in our community, in the specific community called Romemu, strangers know more, and the multi-faith community in our community has been quite robust for many, many years. We had a remarkable leader of that community, Reverend Eleanor Harrison Bregman, who married to Peter Bregman, had a very Jewish home, even though she was brought up in a Christian home, and became herself a minister in that lineage and her mother's Christianity, even as she also was a really good Jewish mom, right? Her kids were brought up Jewish and they went to Jewish day schools, and she kind of was able to hold a lot of different pieces together, right, in one place. And she was on staff. Like, we were the only community that I know of that had a Christian minister as part of our clergy team. And that was for many years. And she was a remarkable teacher and presence. And we had a very robust, as you know, community. And one of the things about being a part of a community that is, I guess where you're quote unquote on the margins, like this Yitro character, is Yitro heard something that moved him and he joined. He joined even though he knew that he wasn't going to be like everybody else. He knew that even though he had access to power because he was Moshe's father-in-law, he still would be perceived potentially by many people as an outsider, like they might not trust him. And yet the power of his ability to be moved, right? Like often in Jewish circles that I grew up in, if somebody converted to Judaism, it was like an obvious choice, right? It was like, oh, of course, they saw the light. But no one ever thought to themselves how remarkable it was to be willing to convert or to naturalize or to change one's, or even to join, right, the non-majority, and how amazing that is. And the Torah here wants us to notice the movement, as you said, of Yitro, but also fundamentally his ability to be impacted, to be impressed upon, to move from, right, from the Midrash picks up on this. Ma shmua shama uva. What could possibly have made this very privileged, powerful politician, the head of Midian, he's got, he's the priest, he goes into the desert to meet this group of, what's he doing out there? The Midrash wants to know. And they hold him as a paragon of someone who is moved to move. And that's something in the last couple of years, I think that especially in the polarized reality that we live in, you ask yourselves, what would it take to convince somebody to change their position? What would it take? What would I have to tell you to know that QAnon is nuts? What would I have to tell you to move from what you think is reality to back to some version of reality that is what would it take? And clearly for someone like this Yitro character, he had heard enough to be willing to leave, just like Moshe, by the way, had heard enough and left his own privileged status as the son of Pharaoh. And, even though he was an Israelite and he wasn't a slave, but he left that privilege in order to be with the people. Jethro leaves his privilege and is moved, right, to change his life and to show that. It's going to feel like that's very much our usual place here in this open up on the first Aliyah this morning is a deep tefillah, a deep prayer, to have the capacity to be inspired, right, to move, inspired to change, inspired to take another's perspective, to make that long, long trek, which can sometimes just be a click away from the complacency and the immutability and unmovable nature to being somehow, right, somehow stirred, right, somehow stirred in these interstices that we live in these in-between spaces to move. So we're gonna call forward at this moment, right? We'll call forward this moment those for whom that Aliyah this morning is speaking to you, as our Rabbi Rivera will read the story of Jethro, of the moved one, of the high priest, of the impacted one, of the one who comes from the outside and joins and contributes for this Aliyah on this morning.
So on your behalf, let me bring the blessing on all our behalf. Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu im kol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
וישמע יתרו כהן מדיין חותן משה את כל אשר עשה אלוהים למשה ולישראל עמו כי יוציא אדוני את ישראל ממצרים. ויקח יתרו חותן משה את ציפורה אשת משה אחר שלוחיה ואת שני בניה, אשר שם האחד גרשום, כי אמר גר חייתי בארץ נוכריה. ושם האחד אליעזר, כי אלוהי אבי בזרי ויצילני מחרב פרעה ויבוא יתרו חותן משה ובנה באשתו אל משה אל המדבר אשר הוא חונה שם הר האלוהים, ויאמר אל משה אני, חותנך יתרו בא אליך, ואשתך ושני בניה עמה, ויצא משה לקראת חותנו, וישתחו וישחלו, וישאלו איש לרעהו לשלום, ויבואו האוהלה. ויספר משה לחותנו את כל אשר עשה אדוני לפרעה ולמצרים על אודות ישראל, את כל התלאה אשר מצאתם בדרך, ויצלם אדוני. ויחד יתרו על כל הטובה אשר עשה אדוני לישראל, אשר הצילו מיד מצרים, ויאמר יתרו, ברוך אדוני אשר הציל אתכם מיד מצרים ומיד פרעה, אשר הציל את העם מתחת יד מצרים. עתה ידעתי כי גדול אדוני מכל האלוהים, כי בדבר אשר זדו עליהם. ויקח יתרו חותן משה עולה ולזבחים לאלוהים, ויבוא אהרון וכל זקני ישראל לאכול לחם עם חותן משה לפני האלוהים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, בחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Misha Berach Avotenu Imotenu. May the one who blessed our ancestors bless all of you that came this morning. La'alot, Lechvod HaMakom, Lechvod HaTorah, Lechvod HaShabbat, and the special Shabbat every year in our community, which is a Shabbat that is uniquely geared towards those who have naturalized or converted in our community. And also, in general, each and every year we remind ourselves of this important teaching of the Torah. That before there was Mount Sinai, there was Mount Yitro. Before there was revelation at Sinai, there was revelation in the heart and mind of a dear, dear, trusted advisor who undid any scar tissue that might have remained from an other that might have been dangerous, and instead, in its place was a wise, deep counsel on how to lead with spaciousness and sustainability. And this morning also we hear deep Torah from Martha Graham as it is filtered through the wisdom of our own Rabbi Rivera on the power of these interstices, on the power of these transitions, on the power of the transitions in our lives, transitions in Torah itself, and noticing the wisdom that's available there as we bring our attention to that space, that the teachers that teach us on how to move gracefully from one peak to another through a graceful dance in the valley of life, teaching us how to be sustainable and how also to open our hearts and minds to receive the wisdom from those who are, quote unquote, coming from the margins, coming into the various places in our lives. May we in this community and in communities like ours and across this beautiful land and world turn our attention to the great gifts that add beauty and profound blessing to our communities, our society, and our countries, from those who, quote unquote, come from the outside and seek to be in dialogue with us, to eat bread, as it were, with us before the source of life. May God bless us in this moment and through this moment of Yitro. And let us all say, Amen. We call forward this morning. Where is she? Oh, there she is. Okay. We call you forward. Adina, Imadi, Bat Yafa, and Michael. We call forward this morning Eden Sidney Foster for the second Aliyah.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hamevorach.
Baruch Adonai Mevorach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamevorach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Ha'olam Asher Bachar Banu Im Kol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. ויהי ממחרת וישב משה לשפוט את העם. ויעמוד העם על משה מן הבוקר עד הערב. וירא חותן משה את כל אשר הוא עושה לעם. ויאמר, מה הדבר הזה אשר אתה עושה לעם? מדוע אתה יושב לבדך בכל העם ניצב עליך מן בוקר עד ערב? ויאמר משה לחותנו, כי יבוא אלי העם לדרוש אלוהים, כי יהיה להם דבר בא אלי. ושפטתי בין איש ובין רעהו, והודעתי את חוקי האלוהים ואת תורתיו. ויאמר חותן משה אליו, לא טוב הדבר אשר אתה עושה. נבול תיבול גם אתה, גם העם הזה אשר עמך, כי כבד ממך הדבר. לא תוכל עשוהו לבדך אתה. שמע בקולי יעצך, ויהי אלוהים עמך. היה אשר לעם מול האלוהים, והבאת אתה את הדברים אל האלוהים. והזכרתם אתהם את חוקים ואת התורות, והודעת להם את הדרך ילכו בה, ואת המעשה אשר יעשון. ואתה תחזה מכל העם, אנשי חיל, יראי אלוהים, אנשי אמת, שונאי בצע. ושמת עליהם שרי אלפים, שרי מאות, שרי 50 ושרי עשרות. ושפטו את העם בכל עת, והיה כל הדבר הגדול יביאו אליך, בכל הדבר הקטון ישפטו הם, והקל מעליך, ונשאו איתך אם את הדבר הזה תעשה בצבך אלוהים. ויכלת עמוד וגם כל העם הזה על מקומו יבוא בשלום.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
אמן. מי שברך אבותינו ואמותינו יברך את עדינה עמדי. Eden, did you want to change your name? You talked to me about that. Okay, Adina Imadi bat Yafa v'Michael. ועבור שאלת לכבוד המקום לכבוד התורה לכבוד, השבת בזכר זה הקדוש ברוך הוא, ישמר ויציל מכל צרה וצוקה מכל נגע ומחלה, וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיה. May the source of life bless you. Eden, where are you? I can't see you. I'm on the wrong page. There you go. And let me do this. 1 second. There you are. So I bless you. What an aliyah to get. Oh, goodness. V'nas'u itach. What those two great words? God says to, Yitro says to Moshe, hey, make sure that everybody has the right place to be, because then they can carry it with you. They can carry it with you. V'nas'u itach. Carry it with you. You can lift it with you. So, knowing you as I do, knowing that you're the blessing of being able to carry and to be carried, and the continual stretching of your heart and mind into the places in our society that need to be lifted up and to be seen and to be held and to be honored and to be healed and empowered. So much a part of your ministry, and as you evolve continuously towards your mission, right? Such a big mission, and so we bless you that you let us hold it with you too. We hold you, we lift you too, as you try to lift so many. V'nasu itach, we want to lift it with you. And so thank you for letting us lift and make visible your presence, because it's always there in our community. And also, this is a special moment also, if I'm trying to remember, Rabbi Mira?
Let Eden speak.
Sorry, for my birthday? That? Yeah, tomorrow is my 36th birthday.
Hey, wish you a happy birthday. 36. It's a special number in our tradition. Lamed Vav next, the 36 candles of Hanukkah. A big deal. So we bless
And Lamed Vav, the hidden ones.
Right, the hidden tzaddikim, the hidden righteous ones, the hidden light of creation, the Or HaGanuz. I bless you with all of that hidden light, our Aquarian friend, and let us all say Amen. A lot of hearts. A lot of hearts over here. All right, everybody, for the third Aliyah, Ya Amor.
Oh, do I get an aliyah? Miriam Shem Tova, Bat Yaakov Vilea.
Tamdi Miriam Shem Tova, Bat Yaakov Vilea. Shlishit Acharona.
Baruch et Adonai Hamborach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. Asher Bachar Banu Im Kol Ha'amin. Venatan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah. Amen. Vayishma Moshe lekol chotno, vayas kol asher amar, vayivchar Moshe anshe chayil mikol Yisrael, vayiten otam rashayim al ha'am. Sarai, וספטו את העם בכל עת, את הדבר הקשה יבאון אל משה, וכל הדבר הקטן ישפטו הם, וישלח משה את חותנו, וילך לו אל ארצו. Baruch atah Havaya Eloteinu Ruach Haolam Asher nat lanu Torat Emet V'chaye Olam nata betochenu Brucha atya Shechina notenet haTorah.
Amen. מי שברך אבותינו ואמותינו יברך את מרים שם טובה בת יעקב אליה בבוא שעלתה לכבוד המקום לכבוד התורה ולכבוד השבת ויזכר זה הקדוש ברוך הוא ישמר ויצילם בכל צרה וצוקה מכל נגע ומחלה וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיה. May the source of life bless you, Miriam, this morning in your reading and in your coming forward to represent and to be a part of this Torah with the wisdom of Vayishma Moshe Lechodno, being able to hear good advice in your life and good direction and to give good direction from the same wellspring that you hear it to then also bring it forward. And part of that is, of course, in your collaborative capacities. That's something that you do very naturally as you choose people and you engage people and help bring out their gifts as well as your own. And so may God continue to bless you. May she shine her face upon you and give you strength. And let us all say, Amen. Amen. Please rise if you are able, everyone, as we pray for those in the community who need healing this morning. Anna Elana Mefanala Beharosla Noam Zivach אז תתחזק ותתרפא והייתה לה שמחת עולם. ענה אלנה מפנה לה בהרוס לה נועם זיווך, אז תתחזק ותשרפא והייתה לה שמחת עולם. מי שברך אבותינו ואמותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב משה, אהרון, דוד ושלמה ויצרף כרחליה בלהזיל בדינה נעמי ורוס. ויברך וירפא כל החולים. בעבור שכולנו מתפללים בעבור בעד רפואתם. וכן ברחמים. May the source of life bring healing in body, heart, mind, and spirit. בתוך שאר חולי ישראל. ובתוך שאר חולי עולם כולו, on this planet and amongst all of those who need healing this morning. And let us say, Amen. Please remain standing, everyone, as we return the Torah to the Ark this morning. Hallelujah, et Shem Adonai, כי נשגב שמו לבדו, הודו על ארץ, ושם מים, וירם כרם לעמו, תהילה לכל חסידיו, לבני ישראל עם קרובו, הללויה, הללויה. מזמור לדוד, היי היי ליי ליי יד ליי 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 היי יד ליי ליי יד ליי דיני ליי היי יד נם דיני ליי 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 נם כל אדוני על המים אל הכבוד ירים אדוני על מים רבים כל אדוני בכוח כל אדוני בהדר, כל אדוני שובר ארזים, וישבר אדוני את ארזי הלבנון, וירקידם כמו עגל, לבנון בסרגל כמו בן רעמים. היי 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 דדדדדדלי ני ני יאי ני 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 ידדדדם דיני ני 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 נדדדדם ינדי נדי נדדדי ני ני ידם ובנוחו יומיים. מצחיים היא למחזיקים בם ותומכיה מאושר דרכיה דרכי נועם וכל תימותיה שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה. חדש חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו כקדם. Rabbi Mira, will you take us into the Aleinu?
עלינו, עלינו לשבח, לאדון הכל לתת, גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, ששם חלקנו עמהם וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
תשמע מי יוצא לארץ משה ויקרא בשמיים על, ושכינת עושה בגבי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עולם את מלכנו אפס זולתו.
בהשבותה אל לבביך,
אל לבביך,
כי אדוני
אדוני
הוא האלוהים,
הוא האלוהים.
בהשבותה אל לבביך, אל לבביך, כי הבעיה היא האלוהים, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. In your word, in your name we are one.
We lift up in this community all of those who are remembering loved ones. If you're in mourning, if you're grieving, we have members of our community who are within the first week of loss. We send our love to them and hold them in our hearts and our minds. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hi, da, da. Lie, lie, la, die. Lie, lie, la, die, la, die. Ha, da, die. Diddy, na, na, na. Diddy, na. Diddy, na, 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 da. Diddy, na, na, na. Diddy, na, na, na. Diddy, na, na. Diddy, na, na. If it is your custom to rise for the mourners, please rise. The mourners Kaddish. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shmei rabba. V'yalmad yivirach yirusei v'yamlich malchusei b'chayechon. Uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. B'agala u'izman ha'kori v'yimeru. Amen. Yehi shmei rabba mivorach de'olam u'lemei almaya yitbarach. V'yishnavach v'yitbar v'yitroma v'yitnasei. V'yisadar v'yisala v'yisalash midikudesha b'richu. Leila min kol birchasa v'shirasa. Tush b'chasa v'nechemasa. Da'amiran v'yolma v'yimiru amen. Yehi shnama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim tovim. Aleinu v'yoko Yisrael v'yimiru amen. Oseh shalom v'imromav. U'mirachamav yaseh shalom. Aleinu Yako Yisrael Yako Yoshvei Tevel V'yimiru. Amen. May those memories be a blessing. We invite you to please rise to join those who were standing just for another 2 minutes, everyone, as we say Enke Eloheinu, Enke Eloheinu, Enke Adonenu, Kim Malkeinu, Moshienu, Enke Elohim, Kadonenu, Ikem Malkeinu, Ikem Moshienu, Nod Eloheinu, Dadonenu, Magenu, Nod Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atum Eloheinu, Atum Adonenu, Tum Malkeinu, Atum Moshienu, Tum Shikinu, Avotenu, Lefanecha Kitoid. Ben, go ahead. Didn't lie.
Yum biddy da yada da yum dum diddy da 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 yada dee. Oh hey yum dum diddy da 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 yum diddy da yada da 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 yada dee da da. Hey yum dum diddy da 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 yum dum diddy da da da. Hi yada da yada da yada da yum dum diddy da 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 yum dum diddy da 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 yum dum diddy da 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 diddy da da. Hey yum dum diddy da 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 ya da da ya da da ya da 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 ya da 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 da. Hey yum dum diddy da 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 ya da da ya da da yum da diddy da 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 ya da dee da do.
Shkoyach, Shekoyach, Yashikoach. Wonderful davening this morning, everyone. A big thank you as we turn to our thank yous this morning. And if you have a cup of blessing, I invite you to go get it and fill it up with your beverage of choice. We thank you this morning for all of those who are behind the scenes. I'm sorry, we have some announcements. Before we do that, a couple of announcements for you. So a couple of announcements in the thank you area. Can't announce them until you move the slide. Just one slide down so we can announce some slides. Oh, we did some thank yous this morning. Great. So let's thank our Torah readers this morning. So Miriam Rubin and Rabbi Mir Rivera, thank you so much into this cup of blessing. Thank you to the entire team, the whole Romemu staff, the beautiful internships from Maya Zinko last night and Ben Perlstein this morning, the Joseph S. Ingber rabbinic interns, to this morning's wonderful Torah service led by Rabbi Rivera in her laning, Miriam Rubin, all these wonderful people behind the scenes. And as we quickly move, I know Willie kind of threw you a curveball there with the thank yous before the thank yous and then the announcements, but we go back to the announcements in a moment. Just so you know what's coming down the pike, everybody, this coming week. Thank you, William. There we go. There are going to be a cycle of prayer poems that have been written by our wonderful member, Rich Orloff. Rich Orloff is going to be sharing some prayer poems and other things next Saturday night, a week from tonight at 6:30. Members of our community will include Lisa Sokolov and Keith Torgan, Hillel Rosenshine, and Linda Rodolitz. It's just going to be a beautiful night, followed by a Revaya, an ecstatic dance party. That's next Saturday night. In other news, of course, our Purim extravaganza coming up in a couple of weeks. We're going to have an evening of Megillah reading and some spieling and some humor. It's going to be incredible. We'll announce that in the coming week. We'll just save the date. And also some lifelong learning classes are also coming your way on the mailing list this week. And lastly, everybody, in our community, we are a community of that is in service. And so we want to just bless all of you that if you feel you need support, the Chesed Committee is waiting to hear from you. So let the Chesed Committee volunteers help you. If you do need the help, please reach out to them. I say this to people pretty frequently. It's very hard to know what's happening in a community of 700 members and families unless people tell us. And so that isn't to say that we don't want to know, and there are ways that we're trying with phone banking and emailing. But if you know someone who needs help, let us know so that we can reach out to them and not have them hold that by themselves, as we said in the Torah reading this morning, v'nasu itach, so that we can lift it together, lifting it together. So into this cup of blessing, some Michaela, where are you? Can we see you? Michaela and Willie. Make yourselves visible. Oh, great Wizards of Oz, where are you? There's Willie Kane behind the scenes. Willie Ashakoach, Michaela, Dr. Michaela in Belgium. So great to have you behind the scenes helping with everything. And we'd be remiss if we didn't let you know about a couple of things that happened in this past week. And they're now in the chat area, which is thank you so much for preemptively. This past Thursday night, we had a remarkable panel discussion on youth justice and criminal justice reform. We thank you, Rabbi Rivera, for your hard work and the work of Tal Siegel and Lauren Jacobs and the entire social justice and social action committees. Thank you to Professor Kara Suval, daughter of Romemu members Mark and Harry Suval, who were really he was really instrumental in bringing a really deep professional perspective that really helped us inform Ruth Messenger, the inimitable, incredible, inspirational Ruth Messenger, World Ambassador for AJWS, who's been my mentor and incredible teacher for many of us. The presence of in our own community, Alina Bloomgarden, who was, whose Music on the Inside program, the not-for-profit that brings music into prisons, and the members of her group that were also there, Dawood, and to Vidal, and to Johnny, and of course, Melanie Roth-Garlick, another member of our community, was the head who brought the perspective of the JCPA, the Jewish Council on Public Affairs. It was just an incredible evening. Huge thank you to all of them. And also, I see here in the chat that something that I made a note, and I thank you, Eden, for putting it here. A big yeshikoch to you, blessings to you, Rabbi Rivera, on the second anniversary of your remarkable not-for-profit, the Amud Jews of Color Torah Academy, second anniversary this Shabbat, right, Rabbi Rivera? This Shabbat.
The 24th, really. But we taught, first class was the 5th of February.
The first class was
2019. I came to your office with my book of Netivot Shalom because I was going to teach about Chavruta, and we taught together. So you're connected.
It's great. It's great. So this is like harvesting these moments, like, it's really amazing. 2 years. That was 2 years ago. Wow. Okay, Rabbi Avira, big yesher koach to you and to Ben this morning. Thank you so much for the davening. Why don't you lead us in the Kaddish, lifting it up for everyone. Rabbi Amira, go ahead.
Oh, I thought that was for Ben Ben
no.
Prostein.
So
Yalla, Ben.
I have a cup.
Okay.
If you want.
Okay. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. בין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי 6 ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. And behold our cups, על כן ברך אדוני את יום השבת, ויקדשהו. סברי חבריי.
לחיים.
Yes. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן.
Amen.
Amen.
טרם כל יציר נברא, עת נשא חפצו כל, זי מלך שמו נקרא. דומו שהמלך טרם כל יציר נברא, עת נשא חפצו כל, זי מלך שמו נקרא. אחרי ככלוס הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא, והוא היה והוא עובר והוא יהיה בתפארה, והוא אחד. אין שני להמשילו להחבירה, בדברי שיט בלי תכלית, לא העוז והחסרם. והוא איני וחי ובלי, וצור חבלי מעת צרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי מנקוסי ביום אקרא. בידו הפקיד רוחי, ואיזי שם אמירה, עם רוחי כבי עשי אדוני לי, לא תירא. אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא, עת נשא חפצו כל, זי מלך שמו נקרא. Man, miss singing with all of you. Another Shabbat goes by and we're not hugging, but feel feels so beautiful to see your faces and to imagine Lisa Sokolov harmonizing together with us, and to hear Valerie's voice and voices of various people during Open Book, whose presence is not only felt through the Zoom camera, but also like just sitting there and sipping tea, coffee. Soon, friends, soon, it's coming, you know. And until then, we have this blessing and this sanctuary that we reside in. So, to Emet and Ahava, and to Debbie, and to Alan, and to all of you here. In Thanksgiving, Yochanan, Marla, Bonnie, Abby, Asher Chayin, Keith playing along with Barbara in the background, and Sarah and Andy, to Sue, to Iva Kaufman and Jamie Askin, Mara and Aaron and Leah Lynn around the corner, Ilana, I think Ken is also somewhere around the corner. And Ken, you're in the non-dual stream with me, brother. We're there, brother. And Sherry Khan is here. To Stuart and Laurie, Ana Luisa in Mexico. ¿Cómo estás? And Sam, who's swaying with us. Bob and Emily. Shabbos, Estelle, Mata Esther, Yerushalayim. Jen and Malka. For you, dear brother Leo. I want to see Brother Richard. Where are you, Richard? Shabbos Richard. Hey, Asuli.
Good Shabbos, yeah. Thank you. Hallelujah.
Keep going, brother. Keep going. Keep going.
Oh Lord, prepare me to be your sanctuary, pure and holy.
Jamie, hand it to Keith.
Tried and true. And in thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you.
Hey Keith, you know what? We didn't do this. You know, I saw in the paper today that Christopher Plummer passed away.
I know.
Shalom. And the whole morning I was singing. I know that he hated this movie, but Edelweiss, Edelweiss.
Every morning you greet me, small and white, clean and bright. You look happy to greet me. Blossom of snow, may you bloom and grow forever. Edelweiss, Edelweiss. Bless Romemu forever. Bless our community forever.